6-year-old Mara Wilson melted hearts in Mrs. Doubtfire and Matilda before she grew up and quit Hollywood. Now, she has lots to say about her past and the way forward. In a 2013 blog post, Mara Wilson opened up about why she decided to quit acting after such a successful run on the big screen, writing, "Film acting is not very fun. Doing the same thing over and over again until, in the director's eyes, you get it right does not allow for very much creative freedom. The best times I had on film sets were the times the director let me express myself, but those were rare." She went on to describe the dehumanizing process of auditions and the absurd nature of being a celebrity. A few years later, Wilson expanded on her lost love for the big screen in a 2016 interview with NPR. She opened up about the death of her mother, which happened when Wilson was 8 years old, and said, "I felt like I had to keep going because film was the only constant in my life."
Especially after my mother died, it felt like that was something that was staying there. It was something that was there for me, my career.
Acting helped her deal with the depression and anxiety she experienced after losing her mother, but the sense of stability she felt from her career soon faded. While Mara Wilson's career as a child actor had its positive and negatives, she revealed in an interview with The Guardian that she had always felt safe while working on movie sets as a young star. But that doesn't mean she was oblivious to the fact that it wasn't okay for everyone, Wilson admitted. "There were definitely some sketchy, questionable things that happened at times. Adults that told dirty jokes or sexually harassed people in front of me. It's good to know that Wilson's experience as a child actor wasn't all bad though, and that she generally felt protected while she was working, even if there were some instances in which she witnessed inappropriate behavior. And that doesn't mean that people didn't sometimes cross the line and expect too much of her as a child actor. For example, as Wilson recalled, people did things like ask me if it was okay if I worked overtime, instead of asking my parents. As if a kid's going to say no, they need their sleep or time to do their homework, while a whole crew depends on their answer.
This is exploitation. It's not fair."
Still, Wilson stands by the fact that she never felt actually unsafe because she worked with mostly experienced, empathetic directors who were accustomed to dealing with children. It certainly sounds as though Wilson's time as a young actor in Hollywood was a double-edged sword, but thankfully, she survived with her good attitude and sense of humor intact and is now thriving as an adult. While she generally experienced a level of safety while she was a child working on film sets, Wilson didn't escape the entertainment industry entirely unscathed. Speaking with The Guardian, she said, "I don't think you can be a child star without there being some kind of lasting damage."
It annoys me when people say, "Oh, we're going to Disney," and they mean Disneyland or Disney World, because to me, Disney just means office buildings.
For all of Wilson's positive spin on her early life, her words suggest that she's still haunted by her past years later. But with her characteristic strength and eloquence, she went on to explain, "The thing that people assume is that Hollywood is inherently corrupt, and there's something about being on film sets that destroys you. For me, that was not necessarily true." While working on film sets didn't overtly damage her, Wilson's time in the industry most definitely left a lasting impact, both positive and negative, on the former child star. One aspect of the damage that Wilson described involves being sexualized at a very young age.
What grade are you in now?
Second.
Oh, second grade. Oh, so now you wouldn't have a boyfriend or anything now, would you?
No.
Being thrust into the public eye as a child was a challenge for Wilson, who found that some adults didn't treat her appropriately. She told The Guardian, "I had people sending me inappropriate letters and posting things about me online. I made the mistake of Googling myself when I was 12 and saw things that I couldn't unsee." Hopefully, lessons can be learned from Wilson's experiences so that current and future child stars don't face the same challenges moving forward. Some may think that being a child actor is glamorous, but that's actually far from the truth. In 2021, Mara Wilson wrote an op-ed for the New York Times called "The Lies Hollywood Tells About Little Girls." In the article, Wilson opened up about some of the more difficult aspects of being famous at such a young age, writing, "I spent my 13th birthday locked in a hotel room in Toronto. Yes, most of us do have to go to work on our birthdays, but we're not 13 years old, and things hit differently when we're kids, especially when it comes to broken promises," Wilson explained. "I was on a press tour to promote the movie Thomas and the Magic Railroad. I had been promised a day off for my birthday, but when I arrived from Los Angeles the night before, I learned I would be talking to reporters all day. Sadly, Wilson had already become accustomed to working on her birthday. She revealed in the article that she turned 8 while making Matilda and turned 9 while shooting A Simple Wish. Despite being used to working on her birthday, Wilson was especially disappointed because her expectations of a day of celebration were dashed. And then, to make things worse, Wilson was honest about her disappointment while speaking to a journalist, which led to reports that she was spoiled and ungrateful, when the truth was much sadder. On top of the creative frustration Mara Wilson experienced with film acting, she suffered an on-set embarrassment with which even non-famous adolescents could identify. In her interview with NPR, Wilson recalled shooting Thomas and the Magic Railroad, saying, "I came to set one day after a few months away, and people were kind of giving each other worried looks, and I had to have the director come and sit with me and explain to me that my body was changing." That sound you just heard was a million teenage girls running upstairs and slamming their bedroom door. We have to imagine that the 1-2 combination of already not feeling the job and having to chat about your bra with your boss when you're still a preteen would be enough to make anyone quit the business. No surprise then that Wilson didn't make another film for 11 years. While Mara Wilson found fame at an extremely young age, she didn't necessarily feel beautiful or glamorous. In a May 2023 interview with The Guardian, Wilson discussed the fact that many young stars end up ruining their careers, their downfalls made brazenly public by the tabloids and the gossip mongers, all of whom seem to be wishing them to fail. Rather than taking on destructive behaviors such as alcohol or drugs, Wilson instead turned the pressure inward. She explained, "I definitely had a self-destructive streak, but it took a different mode. For me, it was a lot of hating myself and saying, like, you're a loser, you're a failure, you're ugly." When she lost out on a role to Kristen Stewart, Wilson put even more pressure on herself, and her self-hatred reached a fever pitch. She recalled how convinced she was that she was ugly and fat. It didn't help that websites, newspapers, and film critics were all saying the same thing. Wilson confessed, "It got to the point where I became much more guarded, more anxious and depressed and cynical. And when you're like that, it's very hard to land a role, because in an audition, you have to be open and honest." Unfortunately, the pressure of working in such a public-facing industry weighed heavily on Wilson, and she thought of herself in an incredibly negative light, which would be difficult for a person at any age to handle. Although she quit acting, Mara Wilson never stopped creating. She wrote a memoir called Where Am I Now? True Stories of Girlhood and Accidental Fame. She also wrote a play and several pieces that landed in high-profile places like McSweeney's, The Daily Beast, and Elle.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
One particular piece, 7 Reasons Child Stars Go Crazy, an insider's perspective, written for Cracked, made national headlines thanks to Wilson's humorous, yet completely on-point account of why actors like Lindsay Lohan and Amanda Bynes struggle to find their footing as adults. Wilson wrote, "If I were to talk to Lindsay Lohan, I'd encourage her to get the hell out of acting. Take up botany or something."
She didn't have a chance. She was put into acting when she was very young, and she hasn't done anything else. She doesn't know how to do anything else.
Having grown up in the spotlight, Wilson knows what it's like to feel the intense pressure of the press and the general public from a young age. As a result, she feels a kinship with Britney Spears, who was finally released from an oppressive conservatorship in April 2022. In a piece for the New York Times, Wilson wrote, "The way people talked about Britney Spears was terrifying to me then, and it still is now. Her story is a striking example of a phenomenon I've witnessed for years. Our culture builds these girls up just to destroy them. We're still living with the scars." Clearly, Wilson still feels betrayed by the press and the pressure she was placed under as a young woman in the entertainment industry. However, the tide may have begun to turn, as marked by Spears' own release from her 13-year-long conservatorship. Perhaps we can all learn to be kinder to others in the world, whether they're famous or not. In addition to her writing, Wilson occasionally does voiceover work and cameos, but for a while, she dedicated much of her time and energy to the nonprofit organization Public Color. The youth development program mentors students who are at high risk or living in poverty, helps them complete their education by offering special courses, and mentors them as they work towards college and the future. It's unclear what affiliation Wilson still has, if any, with the program. However, she was still promoting it and helping to raise funds in February 2017 when she tweeted, "I worked with Public Color for years. I love this organization so much. Please give." Clearly, Wilson felt a strong inclination to give back to the community following her early challenges as a young actor.
I knew that something was wrong with me, and I wanted to get help, but I didn't know where to go.
In 2019, Wilson was the keynote speaker at the 26th Annual OCD Conference in Austin, Texas. In an interview for the conference, Wilson proved just how important advocacy is to her, saying, "The world is a more open place than you think, and the people who love you will love you no matter what. There's no shame in having something you can't control, and there are so many of us out there with OCD that you are definitely not alone. If you're unfamiliar with internet challenges, welcome to the World Wide Web. It's weird here. Challenges are an entire genre of internet video in which people participate in anything from dance crazes to dangerous Kylie Jenner lip-based activities to dumping ice water on their heads for charity. They can be literally anything, which is why, in 2018, more than 2 decades after the film was released, Matilda became the inspiration for one such challenge. No, we don't know why, and we would argue no earthly being does. The challenge involved recreating the scene from the film where Matilda first learns she has powers. To the tune of Thurston Harris's Little Bitty Pretty One, challenge participants clean their homes as things move and dance along with her as if by magic. Regardless of how the Matilda challenge came to pass, Mara Wilson absolutely loved it, which is pretty much the holy grail of any celebrity-based challenge. She gave her seal of approval by sharing a video on Facebook of a young girl hilariously pretending to have telekinesis, a trick she pulled off by having several ineffectively obscured helpers tossing items around the room while she pointed at them using her powers. Eat your heart out, George Lucas. Speaking of internet things, Mara Wilson weighed in on another web trend: memes. This one involved people pitting her character from Matilda against a more recent but similarly gifted character, Eleven from Stranger Things. This debate got downright technical, with one journalist tweeting, "Folks are really saying 11 would win, and I am perplexed. She had training and still could barely wiggle a truck. Matilda had kids flying, electricity going crazy, multiple objects moving simultaneously. 11 don't want no smoke." Wilson took a more egalitarian approach and shut the whole conversation down by tweeting, "Matilda and 11 would choose not to fight and would instead become friends."
They would understand each other, they would respect each other, and of course, what would they do? They would have breakfast foods together.
Granted, that probably depends on how much attention Matilda got from Mike, but look, there's no need to send this thing right back to the weeds, right? In 2015, Mara Wilson teamed up with Project You Are Okay to create a YouTube video discussing her experience with depression, anxiety, and obsessive-compulsive disorder, or OCD.
I wish somebody had told me that it's okay to be anxious, that you don't have to fight it.
In the video, Wilson goes on to explain that fighting anxiety makes it worse and describes the condition as the fear of fear. And perhaps most importantly, she stresses the fact that it's okay to feel depression. Over the years, Wilson has regularly spoken out about her diagnoses, becoming an advocate for other people living with mental health challenges. In 2014, she turned her personal experiences into a comedy show called What Are You Afraid Of? While it can't have been easy for the former child star to speak on such a personal topic, she's continually proven that she's ready to help anyone living with depression, anxiety, OCD, or any other mental health condition. In a 2019 interview for the 26th Annual OCD Conference, Wilson explained, "I think it's important to destigmatize OCD and fight the stereotypes about it. It's not a personality quirk or type, it's a debilitating illness. There needs to be more understanding of what it actually is." Whatever she might be dealing with personally, Wilson is intent on helping others, which says something important about her. As well as living with OCD, Mara Wilson also found herself facing body dysmorphia, which was in part brought on by the negative press she faced as a young actor. During a 2022 appearance on the podcast Maya Bialik's Breakdown, Wilson admitted that body dysmorphia has been a major issue for her, one that she's still dealing with today. She talked about beginning to be self-conscious about her looks and feeling like she was hideous and wanted to hide, but the celebrity factor made it all way worse.
I had people in newspapers, adults in newspapers, saying that I was ugly, saying that I was, quote, odd looking.
Reading these opinions and constantly hearing about her looks had a devastating impact on the young star, who started to internalize some of the things being written and said about her. During an interview with the International OCD Foundation in 2020, Wilson opened up about body dysmorphia again, detailing how it ties into her OCD diagnosis. As she explained, "We are not obsessions, we are not compulsions. We are not intrusive thoughts or body dysmorphia or checking rituals. What defines us is how we live our lives, despite our struggles." Rather than focusing on the negative thoughts and challenges she faces on a daily basis, Wilson was keen to explore all aspects of her life, including the positives. While body dysmorphia still admittedly impacts her on a regular basis, Wilson has made sure she helps others dealing with the very same issues. Mara Wilson's sexuality became a hot topic in June 2016 when she tweeted, "I used to identify as mostly straight. I've embraced the bi/queer label lately." The statement was part of a series of tweets that Wilson shared in the wake of the mass shooting that claimed the lives of more than 50 LGBTQ+ people at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando. Though she was open with her followers, even sharing a photo of her 18-year-old self hanging out at a gay club, the response led Wilson to press pause on the conversation for a while, tweeting, "I think I'm going to stay off Twitter for a few days. I had no idea this would be such a thing, but I guess it's flattering." In 2017, Wilson returned to the topic in an interview with Ariel Goldberg, in which she said she'd like to see bisexuality destigmatized, particularly within the entertainment world. She summed up her feelings eloquently by saying that embracing someone's sexuality is a simple matter of respect, stating, "You don't need to understand something completely to be okay with it." Being a writer who promotes her own work, Wilson uses social media to share her projects with her fans. You really don't have to look any further than her prolific use of both Facebook and Twitter to realize that she also happens to love the medium. However, in a 2014 interview with Longreads, Wilson lamented that Twitter, her preferred social media platform, is terrible when it comes to reeling in online harassment. She expanded on her feelings in a 2018 piece she wrote for Elle, in which she outlined some pretty scary treatment she endured from a fellow Twitter user. Wilson wrote, "He had threatened to sexually assault me and several of my friends, kill our pets and partners, and even my friend's newborn baby. He found phone numbers and addresses, tweeted them publicly, and said he could easily show up at our homes if we didn't do what he wanted." Wilson admitted that she would happily quit Twitter and Facebook if there were another way to reach people, but that she sticks around for the promotional benefits, the ability to crowdfund worthy causes, and the positive interactions she has with fans. She mused, "It's odd how platforms that connect people are run by people who don't seem to care much about other people." In a June 2018 essay titled Jason and the Psychonauts, Wilson shared a funny anecdote about an email she got from a man named Jason, who offered her $50,000 to attend a, quote, private gentleman's retreat at a Montreal cabin where he wanted her to pick and eat magic mushrooms with him and 9 of his long-lost bros. And then, in Jason's words, "We will introduce the surprise guest, Mara Wilson. She could consume mushrooms along with us and help moderate our catching up session." Nope, that doesn't sound ominous at all, does it? But in spite of dismissing the email for being what it was, ludicrous on its face, Wilson offered a thoughtful explanation of why she wouldn't be interested in attending what she referred to as Jason's Bronaissance. Wilson is extremely aware of the youth of her fanbase, which is kind of surprising, considering anyone who loved her at the time she starred in Mrs. Doubtfire would be well into adulthood by now. Regardless, Wilson wrote that she tries to be a role model and keep in mind that kids are watching. She explained, "It's not that I believe things like sex and substances are inherently immoral, I just think they are solely for grown-ups. Children should not be concerned with them. They've got enough to deal with already." Although Mara Wilson has backed away from acting, she made a cameo in a 2016 episode of Broad City that paid homage to Mrs. Doubtfire.
Okay, I'm gonna do the pan-roasted turbot with fennel pollen aioli, prosciutto, berlotti beans, parsnips, turnips, and carrots.
So the turbot, yeah.
How did that come about? Well, according to an interview with Brooklyn, Broad City star and co-creator Abby Jacobson told Wilson about an upcoming Mrs. Doubtfire tribute episode after Wilson began following her on Twitter. A few days later, the typically reserved Wilson recalled, "I felt emboldened. I think it was after a glass of wine, and I said, you know, if you want me to make a cameo or something on this, I totally would. I don't act much. I don't really like film or TV acting, but this would be really fun, and I have a lot of respect for you too." Needless to say, Jacobson and her co-star and co-creator, Alana Glazer, were elated. According to Wilson, Glazer's happy email read, "Yes, yes, Queen." While Mara Wilson's childhood was far from normal, the former child star has learned to reflect as she's gotten older. Now, with hindsight, she seemingly understands herself a lot better than she once did. In 2023, she told The Guardian, "I never thought of myself as a people pleaser because I thought they were laid-back, happy-go-lucky types, and that's not what I was. I was more emotional, angry, easily frustrated, and overwhelmed." Wilson has also discovered that she's not alone in looking back on her life and wondering why she acted a certain way. As she's grown older, she's learned that a lot of women, especially, felt pressure to be good little girls.
"I'm fed up with all this reading. You're a wormwood, you start acting like one."
With age, Wilson has begun to understand her behavior as a young woman and is determined to make changes moving forward. Having lived her life in the public eye from early childhood, it's impossible to understand how much pressure Wilson must have felt to live up to expectations. But she's come through it all with the determination and mindset to live in a more honest and authentic way in which she honors her true self.
Don't be phony, be truthful, be real.
In July 2023, Mara Wilson threw her support behind the Writers Guild of America and impending SAG-AFTRA strikes. In an effort to make people understand the issues, she made the shocking revelation that, in spite of her massive success as a child star, she doesn't actually qualify for SAG-AFTRA health insurance coverage. By way of explanation, Wilson tweeted, "I haven't acted much as an adult, but I was a recurring character on one of the most critically acclaimed animated shows of all time, as well as playing an actual Disney villain. But thanks to streaming, I have never once made enough to qualify for SAG-AFTRA healthcare." Wilson wasn't alone in detailing her difficulties obtaining SAG-AFTRA health insurance, with a slew of actors revealing that they, too, hadn't earned enough money to qualify for the essential benefit. It would seem that many successful actors also faced the same difficulties in not being able to support themselves or access health benefits on their salaries, which in part led to members of SAG-AFTRA joining the WGA strike in July 2023, soon after Wilson's revelation. Having worked in the entertainment industry since the early 90s, Wilson has lived most of her life in the spotlight.
I think that there was a time in my life where I felt very frustrated because I felt almost like, people knew me for Matilda but not for myself.
Despite being remembered for many of her earliest roles in films like Mrs. Doubtfire and Matilda, Wilson has been blazing a new trail for herself as an adult. Most importantly, she refuses to let Hollywood define her, and instead has been embracing her uniqueness and finding a new sense of self-worth. Looking back on her life in Hollywood, she told The Guardian, "I don't know if they really know what to do with a short, curvy Jewish brunette. I don't want anybody telling me, you need to lose 30 pounds and get a nose job." Rather than struggling to change herself to fit Hollywood's narrow definition of stardom, Wilson has found her own personality and sense of beauty in who she is now. And when she thinks about who she is, she finds the answer in her goals, her personal relationships, and her very real accomplishments. Now that she has come to terms with what happened to her as a child star, Mara Wilson is living her own life on her own terms. And we're looking forward to seeing what comes next.